the Secretary for Foreign Affairs and International Trade, the representative of the AUC, the representative of the European Union delegation to Zimbabwe, senior government officials, colleagues from the UN system and from other development partners, invited guests, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like to warmly welcome you all to this National Consultative Forum on the African Continental Free Trade Area, organized collaboratively with the government of Zimbabwe and the African Union Commission. This forum is part of the process of preparing a national strategy for Zimbabwe on the African Continental Free Trade Area, as some other African countries are currently doing as well. The essence is for Zimbabwe to position itself effectively well in benefiting from the Cfda, which has gone into force on 30th May 2019 with a required number of ratifications of 22. And Zimbabwe happens to be the 23rd in the ratification process. The Cfda is obviously a moving train, and the earlier countries engage it and strategize to benefit from it, the better for our member states. This is exactly why we're here today. The dream of the Cfda is not new. It's part of the Pan-African historic aspiration of creating an economically integrated, prosperous, and peaceful continent. This dates back to the 1960s when the Organization of African Unity was born. Kwame Nkrumah, speaking in 1963 at the inaugural conference of the formation of the OAU, noted, and I quote, "But just as we understood that the shaping of our destinies required of each of us our political independence and bent on all our strength for this attainment, so we must recognize that our economic independence resides in our African Union and requires the same concentration upon the political achievement," unquote. Subsequently, virtually all continental economic blueprints for the structural transformation of the continent, including the famous Lagos Plan of Action and the Final Act of Lagos of 1981, the Abuja Treaty establishing the African Economic Community of 1991, and Agenda 2063 all emphasize the imperative of a borderless free trade zone and an integrated market in order to enhance trade, productivity, and the development of the continent. When African leaders gathered in Kigali on 21st March 2018 to launch and sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, in which no less than 40 countries were present, they were giving practical expression to an age-long Pan-African dream. The Cfda is perhaps the fastest continental agreement to have secured the required number of ratifications in just about 1 year. This is very historic. In AU treaties and agreements, it takes no less than 5 years to get ratification. This particular agreement has taken only 1 year for us to do that. This demonstrates the commitment of Africa's political leadership and the African people towards the urgency of the economic transformation of the continent. The Cfda is one of the flagship projects of Agenda 2063, especially its 10-year implementation plan, which seeks to promote inclusive and sustained economic growth and accelerated economic development and integration in Africa. The Cfda also sits in tandem with key goals of Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Sustainable Development Goals. These include Goal number 1, ending poverty, Goal number 2, zero hunger, Goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, Goal number 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, Goal number 10, reduced inequalities, and Goal number 12, responsible production and consumption. Hence, the Cfda is a win-win situation for the regional and global commitments of Zimbabwe. The Cfda will create the biggest free trade area in the world with a market of more than 1.2 billion people and combined GDP of more than $2.5 trillion. The Cfda has immense opportunities for increasing intra-regional trade, enhancing production, promoting economics of scale, creating jobs, raising incomes, and improving the living standards of the African people. Studies suggest that if successful, Africa's manufacturing sector will double in size, with annual output increased from over $500 billion in 2015 to $1 trillion in 2025, and contributing additional 14 million stable and well-paid jobs. However, the CFTA has to be backed up by increased productive capacity, enhanced regional value chains, and removing internal obstacles to the growth of SMEs so that African countries can compete well in the liberalized regional market. The Zimbabwe Transitional Stabilization Program, October 2018 to 2020, speaks to the imperatives of the CFTA. The goals of export competitiveness, smart agriculture, beneficiation and value addition of the country's mineral resources, resuscitation of the industrial sector, growth of tourism, and promoting a digital economy can seek value and expression in the CFTA. For instance, Africa's tourism sector remains largely underdeveloped, with tremendous opportunities for intra-Africa tourism. In a country like South Africa, for example, no less than 70% of the tourism is from Africa, which tells us the immense opportunities that exist for Zimbabwe and other countries for us to develop this sector. The CFTA can unlock such potentials as goods and services move freely, and expectedly soon, human mobility will accompany such process. Zimbabwe, having the second largest platinum and chrome deposits and the fifth largest lithium in the world, can attract investment capital across the continent as the barriers to free trade and investments are deconstructed through the CFTA. The goal of becoming an upper middle income country by 2030 is attainable as macroeconomic stability consolidates, the export base increases, and the economy is diversified. A good national strategy on the CFTA, with committed implementation of the strategy, can support Zimbabwe's efforts towards economic renewal and consolidation. Honorable Secretary, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to note that the CFTA agreement is not self-executing. It requires Zimbabwe to deploy deliberate strategies towards ensuring that the private sector, as key stakeholder in production and trade, is primed to exploit a larger market and product opportunities offered by the CFTA with reduced tariff and non-tariff barriers. It is imperative to, among others, address supply-side constraints limiting the productive capacity of industry to stimulate competitiveness. Coherence between the national industrial policy and trade promotional initiatives is very crucial. Furthermore, the effective exploitation of the CFTA will require consensus among all stakeholders: the private sector, government, academics, civil society, women, and youth organizations. Hence, the imperative to establish a well-resourced national CFTA committee as part of the framework to entrench and facilitate the required consultative processes in the implementation of the agreement. Distinguished guests, dear participants, I would like to assure you of ECA's continued support and commitment, not only in developing the national strategy on the CFTA, but also in other sectors as well, in the concerted attempt of the government to rejuvenate the economy and put it on the path of sustainable growth and development. Zimbabwe is one of the priority focus countries of ECA for support and collaboration. In closing, I would like to thank the staff of the Ministry of Industry and Commerce and also of International Trade, Foreign Affairs and International Trade, and also colleagues from the ECA and the AUC for their tireless efforts in putting this forum together. Also, I would like to thank the European Union for their commitment and support for the CFTA process. We are indeed very grateful. In my closing words, there is a lot to gain and opportunities to explore in being part of the CFTA initiative. This platform offers us a unique opportunity to hear our views, think differently and out of the box, and strategize on how Zimbabwe will benefit tremendously from the CFTA agenda. I commend Zimbabwe for its bold step in ratifying the CFTA agreement. It is a step in the right direction, and with our efforts here today and tomorrow, Zimbabwe is poised to be a winner in the CFTA initiative. I wish us very successful deliberations and thank you all for your kind attention.